Okay, so as we've seen, there are philosophers who are going to argue that if what constitutes moral considerability for human beings is their capacity for rationality, their intelligence, their ability to have experiences, they possess consciousness and some ability to experience pain and pleasure. If that's what gets human beings within the circle of moral considerability, then other non-human things who possess those same qualities to some degree would also have some moral status or some degree of moral considerability. And there are going to be AI philosophers who say, well, this extends not just to non-human animals, but to machines themselves. And they're going to make a couple of arguments here. One of them is based on the principle of substrate non-discrimination, which is just fancy terminology. What it means is this, is that if two beings have the same functionality and the same conscious experience and differ only in the substrate of their implementation, then they have the same moral status. Okay, what does that mean? It means this. If you have two beings and they have the same functionality, they have the same sort of ability to process information, and they're having the same kind of conscious experience of things, and the only difference between them is what they're made of, what the generator of the consciousness and rationality are made of, then they have the same moral status. So we might think back to earlier conversations we've had about this, the principle of impartiality, which says that if you're going to treat things differently, there has to be a morally relevant distinction between the things that justifies different treatment. And what philosophers who make this argument on the principle of substrate non-discrimination say is, look, when we look at a human being and we see its value is based on its ability to have or its capacity for experiences of various kinds, and these experiences are based in or rooted in or the product of the cells that constitute their brains and nervous systems, then if a machine is able to have those same kinds of experiences, and the only difference between the human being and the machine is the material that's making the experiences possible. In other words, it's not brains, but that's not tissue, but it's circuits in the machine. That's not a morally relevant difference between the two things. What's morally relevant is the experiences themselves. And if the experiences are the same, then they have to be granted the same moral status if the experiences are what we use as the basis to include human beings and non-human animals in the circle of moral considerability. Now, we might think really carefully about some of the language that's being used here because it's a little loaded, right? So you look at the first part of this statement. If two beings, not things, that's not the line of argument here. And so maybe one question we might ask in response to this argument is, well, what is the nature of being? And is a machine something that can possess that quality? What does it mean to be? Okay, same conscious experience. Well, what's an experience? And is an experience something that a machine could have? And how would we determine when a machine is having an experience? And what the AI philosophers are going to challenge us on this are going to say, look, you just assume, based on the output that you're able to see with your sense organs, that the people around you are having an experience that's like the one that you're having. But you don't know that that's the case. You're just looking at the behavior that they exhibit, and you're making the assumption that that behavior is somehow associated with an experience that other human being is having. And they're going to say, if a machine is able to demonstrate the same kinds of behavior, imagine like a robot, for example, like Sonny from iRobot, if a machine is able to provide you compelling evidence that it's having the same kind of experience that you think gives your life value, and the only difference between you and the robot is that you're made of different stuff, that's not a sufficient basis to justify treating the human being with greater moral considerability than the machine. Another line of argument that these philosophers are going to make is called the principle of ontogeny non-discrimination. Don't you love the jargon that philosophers come up with? Okay, what this says is this, is if two beings have the same functionality and the same consciousness experience and differ only in how they came into existence, then they have the same moral status. So you and I and the conscious experiences that we have and our capacity for rationality and experience all came to be with the fertilization of a human egg, right? That's how we came to be. We came to be through the process of fertilization and fetal development and birth and so on and so forth. Well, what these philosophers are arguing is, okay, so here you are, and we know how you got here. What if there's a machine that has the same things that you now have that you think justify including you in the circle of moral considerability, but they didn't get it through the fertilization of a human egg or any kind of fetal development. They just got it by copying, pasting code into this machine. And now this machine is having an experience that is indistinguishable from the experiences that you claim you have that give you a moral status that's greater than the machine. But how you came into existence isn't a morally relevant distinction for evaluating the moral status of the thing that's having these experiences.